No emails, no faxes, no phone calls, no nothing. Simply silence, Lloyd.
Ari.
Silence, Lloyd. It's golden.
That, of course, Super Agent Ari Gold from Entourage. He epitomized the power and control agents have in Hollywood. Well, a new book details the history of one of the most famous and influential agencies of them all. It's called Powerhouse, the untold story of Hollywood's creative artists agency. A short time ago, I spoke with author James Andrew Miller, who's kind enough to give us some of his time. James, thank you very much for the time. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, let's try and encapsulate more than 40 years in 10 minutes here, but start about how 5 guys at William Morris decided to go to lunch and never came back.
That's basically what happened. They were 5 young guys, some more powerful than the others, but not really major players at William Morris. And they looked ahead at the years to come, and they realized it was such a structured, stifling place that they really weren't going to have much influence, much power, or much money if they stayed. They decided to take off. They put up some card tables. They had their wives answer the phones. And, you know, that was 1975. And by the end of the decade, they were well on their way to becoming a real important player in the Hollywood scene.
Well, clearly, Michael Ovitz and Ron Meyer, the two dominant names of the 5 there that really came to define CAA from its inception till the next part of the story that we'll get to shortly. But did they ever envision at the time that they weren't just going to upend maybe how the studios, which were the controlling factors back then, did they have any idea that they were going to branch into so much more, whether it be TV and beyond? Or did they think at the time they just felt kind of compressed where they were over at William Morris?
The truth is that the 5 men did not know each other all that well. Meyer and Ovitz knew each other, and Meyer knew a couple of the others. But the point is that I think that they all had different expectations about what this new agency was going to be. And the youngest of them, and actually the least experienced of them, Michael Ovitz, was the one who had the grand visions. I think that, you know, Ron Meyer loved actors and actresses and representing them. Bill Haber loved the television business, as well as Mike Rosenfeld and Roland Perkins. But Ovitz wanted to get into other things. He wanted to be a mover and a shaker and involved in investment banking and marketing. He got involved with Coca-Cola for the Polar Bears commercials, helped consult on takeovers from the Japanese of movie studios, and really started to get more and more involved in things that had less to do with clients.
Well, let's use that Polar Bear ad, which I think many of our audience may remember, but it's a perfect launching point into Ovitz, because apparently it was a huge success, the ad campaign, and the Coca-Cola folks with a $10 million check here to show their gratitude sent it over, I guess with a polar bear, stuffed bear or whatever, to Ovitz. He returned it uncashed, voided, and said, "We need to talk." $31 million later, he got his fee, but in many ways, God knows he was successful, and they branched out in so many ways, but he made a ton of enemies along the way, didn't he?
Yes, but let's go backwards for a second to that Coca-Cola formula, because he decided not to do the contract with Coca-Cola up front, in effect betting on himself and betting on the agency's success. So I think that shows a little bit of what he was made of. I think that, you know, by the end of the mid-'80s, late 80s, he was now generally regarded as the most powerful man in Hollywood. And absolutely, did he make some enemies on the way up? Yes. Was there bitterness? Was there jealousy? Absolutely.
Well, give an idea of the extent of the reach, because I know at one point you share an anecdote from Magic Johnson, who said to Ovitz, you know, hey, you could run one of these studios. And he said, why would I want to do that? I run them all anyway. And we can have stories that will take us more than an hour, from these agents in this agency literally shaping bands like Fleetwood Mac, to putting stars in films, talking them out of career suicides, leading on agencies to pick certain people over others, then getting into the financing of it. Just how powerful at its apex was CAA in Hollywood under Ovitz and Meyer?
I think they were incredibly powerful. It was a combination of 3 things, really, a perfect storm. One was they were incredibly aggressive. The second was it was a seller's market. And the third was they had this unbelievable roster of clients that everybody wanted to be in business with. So if you take all 3 of those things together, it really is, you know, a recipe for domination.
And then, like you say in the beginning, there's Shakespearean elements to all of this. While maybe Five Guys started, it clearly was Ovitz and Meyer. Ovitz, the business guy, Meyer, who had the soft touch, and his clients would go through a wall for him, and they believed he'd do the same for them. So at one point, Ovitz, I guess, sees over the years that there's going to be an end game to this here, and he's getting burnt out what he's doing. And he wanted the job over at Universal, but he and Brofman were fighting. So he sent his best friend Meyer to go out there to talk him into basically a deal, and they had haggled over autonomy and salary and all the rest. Meyer leaves the office, but he leaves the office with a job for himself. Talk about how in many ways that more than just fractured a friendship, that really was the end of CAA.
Right. Well, there is one little detail in there that needs to be noted, which is Universal repeatedly made an offer to Michael Ovitz, and he repeatedly said no. And so as a result, it wasn't so much that Ron Meyer stole the job from him. It was, as Ron Meyer said, Michael left it in the trash can, and then Ron retrieved it from there. But look, I mean, in 1995, the agency went through a gigantic thrombosis, and Meyer, Ovitz, and Bill Haber left. They were replaced by a younger generation of agents who are still there, by the way, and who have now been at CAA for 21 years, which is longer than Meyer, Ovitz, and Haber were there. And so one of the things that the book tries to do is actually tries to capture and delineate what is power, and how do you absorb and how do you put together such a powerful slate for a company while the business is changing.
Where do you see the future of CAA, especially in the evolving way that we consume entertainment and information? It's different ways of keeping score here, and nobody knows what it's going to look like 5-10 years from now.
The landscape for content is changing all the time. Right now, CAA and WME are backed by giant private equity firms. So now they have money to invest in things. I mean, WME bought IMG for nearly $2.5 billion. They bought the UFC for $4 billion. CAA has made, significant but not as grand acquisitions and investments. So I think that one of the things that these agencies are starting to realize is it's not just about movies and television and music acts. It's about investing in technology, investing in different kinds of businesses, and thereby creating a whole new revenue picture for the future.
Well, it's a fascinating book. Again, it's called Powerhouse, The Untold Story of Hollywood's Creative Artist Agency. James, I really appreciate a few minutes. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, everybody, when we come up next, we'll take a look at some local headlines. Stay with us.